Good afternoon, everyone. Give it just a minute more here to let a few more people join in. Well, Michael, while we wait for a few people to join, how's the weather up there in Massachusetts?
Having a one good day this week. We reached 60.
Ah,
We are now in a cold spell for the next 10 days.
yeah, down here at Aberdeen Proving Ground, just north of Baltimore, it's about 76.
We have to actually bring our plants in at night. It's 32. It's actually frosting and freezing in April.
All right. Well, to respect everybody's time, we're happy you're here today. We're excited to give you a little bit of a background of how Secure CMMC came to be and what it is, how it might be useful to you. And we're excited today to have Michael Dempsey on the call, who is the inventor. I'm Tobias Musser, or Toby, if you meet me on the street. I'm the co-CEO of M&S Group, a managed service provider that is also a C3PAO. And we provide international MSP and MSSP services in support of the CMMC mission. We're a level 2 MSP, and we're just excited to partner with Michael to get this awesome system out there that he's built. Michael, go ahead and introduce yourself.
So I'm Michael Dempsey. I'm the CEO of CISEVE. As Toby said, I'm the creator of SecureCMMC as a C3PAO. CISEVE actually has three divisions. We work in federal and classified DoD work, and we are also the C3PAO. Um, Obviously, I focus mainly on CMMC. So we've been around, and I'm looking forward to going through the slides today with everyone and answering their questions.
Awesome. Well, to that point, Michael, CMMC's been continuing to develop. More clarification comes out every day. The program went live. Let's talk a little bit about where things are so that people can get information straight from somebody who sits on the cyber AB calls with all of the other C3PAOs. Could you just quickly review kind of where we are with the phases of rollout and what people should be thinking about?
Sure. The phase rollout, as everyone knows, was supposed to be four phases, which the first one started last November, November 2025. And each November, a new phase will start. So phase one is it's in some contracts, right? So the contracts are requiring some folks to be certified. Phase two, which starts this November, will increase that number of contracts. So large and small ones may be seeing this. And or if you have an option year starting after November, it may appear in there. Um, the key clause, as you see on the screen, is 7021. That's really what you want to search for in your contracts for that requirement. So it's kind of moving along. And one of the things I want to point out is the rule says there's four phases, but everyone should realize that phase four is one day long. That's the day it goes into all contracts, and that will be November 10th, 2028. So keep in mind, although it's four phases, phase four is one day long. So we're about 30 months out from all contracts having it. So
Yeah, as Michael mentioned, you want to check sections L and M of your RFPs and see if there's gatekeeping options or requirements, sorry, and what you have to do. Michael, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty. People are getting messaging that this November it's kicking in and it's going to be a requirement. You mentioned that this is a phased rollout. It's likely that this is going to initially only be in contracts that are more sensitive than others. Any thoughts around that and allaying people's panic that they suddenly have to have it by this November 10th?
yeah, that's interesting. It started about 6 weeks ago. I noticed a lot of calls and people are worried about November. We need to get things done by November. I'm not sure where it came from. It's just, again, more contracts are going to have it. Um, we want to say it's more sensitive contracts that will have it, but we actually don't know what contracts it's going to be in. It has shown up in smaller, I don't want to say irrelevant, but smaller contracts that uh, you'd be surprised that it was in. So it can be in any contract at this point. The real driver here, though, as you may know, is the prime contractors. The primes are really pushing their subs to be there because the larger primes are more likely to see the clause first because they have so many contracts, but they can't bid on it if their subs are not certified. So you would not be able to be on Raytheon's team or Lockheed's team if you are not certified and it's required. So they're really driving everyone. They kind of started really strongly last summer, uh, enforcing their subs to provide information where they're at, when do they expect to be it. We've even had talked to folks where the prime is requiring them to at least be on a C3PO schedule. And some of the contracts are saying, hey, we want to see that you're at least on a schedule with the C3PO under contract. So that's also happening out there.
So one other thing I just want to help clarify for people who are watching this, we've heard a lot of people um, come to us and say that they've gotten advice that they don't need to comply even though their prime has a contract because they don't receive CUI. Could you talk a little bit about the flow down requirement and how that works?
Sure. So the rule actually requires them to flow down that requirement to all of their, so they have to flow it down to all of their subs that will have CUI. But the prime, again, to be overly cautious, is just requiring all of his subs because they need to protect themselves. They don't want to take the risk that, hey, company B, we need you, and then all of a sudden they're not actually certified to receive the information. So the primes are required to flow it down as necessary. And then even if it flows down to you and you have a sub, you need to flow it down. So it goes all the way down the supply chain. So the primes are driving this again, that you have to have it because they're protecting themselves and their risk. And if you are a prime, you should be doing the same thing, right? It's just good business practice. Reduce your risk as much as possible, increase your odds of getting that RFP. And at this point, you get extra points on RFPs, even if it doesn't have level 2 requirements. I've heard of some of them offering up to 1,000 points for conditional and 3,000 points for fully certification. So be aware of that as part of a marketing and business approach.
Yeah, business risk. All right. Well, let's jump in to the main topic for today, which is CMMC compliance with confidence. And certainly confidence comes from predictability, from things that have been done multiple times and have consistency. And Michael, you have a great story. You built this system originally for yourself. Tell us a little bit, how did you come up with that idea? What caused you to jump in and say, "Hey, I'm going to make a Google Enclave"?
So it's a great question. It was early on. There were no C3POs at the time. We were in line to become one of the first ones. And the hurdle we had was um, developing something that was cost effective and easy to use. And
Had you
with
tried any
Microsoft,
other systems?
I tried Microsoft. So we went into Microsoft. Um, and as we all know, they have a security score back in the day, 5 years ago. They tell you how good you're doing. And if you did these settings and this, and after 3 days of work, my score went up 1 point, even though I changed 150 different settings and did all the documentation. So it was very frustrating, not to pick on Microsoft, but that's what it was. It was frustrating. It was hard. It was cumbersome in the sense that you had to use 5 different admin consoles. So this was a struggle as a small business. You know, I needed to have all of those skills plus the CMMC skills. So it was really hard to do. Um, and then at one point, it came out, Google finally got their FedRAMP high. And I said, that's what we need to use. Not only is it FedRAMP moderate, it's even better. It's high. It had all the extra DoD, IL levels and things like that. Um, and so we looked into it. It was definitely much cheaper. And as we sat through and went through it, it was so much easier to manage. I mean, I was thoroughly surprised at all the features and admin abilities, right? Because I'm not only did I have to use it for assessments, but I had to manage it, right? So I had to do the admin features. So it was much more simplistic and easy to do. You do have to make a little adjustment, right? Because different names, it's called docs and sheets and slides instead of the usual words. Um, but it went well. We actually did build it rather quickly, at least got the base of it going. And so to jump ahead, we finished it. And when we did finally get our assessment with DIPCAC and they assessed the enclave, they assessed it in 6 hours versus a whole week for normal assessments, 3 to 5 days. They finished us in one day. It was pretty amazing how it came about. And so that's how we kind of started as a C3PO. That was 4 years ago. 4 years ago? 5 years ago.
So, so
It was
let's dig in there. Like often, as professionals operating in CMMC world, when we hear that somebody passes in a really short period of time, it sets off all sorts of alarm bells, and people are like, did they really did they do it right? Was the assessor, was the DIBCAC team, did they have their coffee that morning? Were they reading everything? Y- in your website, you say you applied all the STIGs and you were sort of going for nation state security plus all the Google stuff. Talk a little bit about how much you can inherit from Google and things that they're actually doing for you that sort of led to the ability of the environment to pass rapidly.
so Google's Enclave, Google Workspace, I'm sorry, is FedRAMP High, which means most of their controls are at a highly secure level. And we only had to implement it. So in other words, say we will use this version, and then Google managed it. Obviously, Google manages all the physical controls of it. The environment is, as a SaaS, it's all in the cloud, and the endpoints are browser connections to the workspace. So everything is self-contained within Google itself, between the Google Chrome browser and Google Workspace. Um, we inherit all the protections behind it. As if you don't know, Google scans every file and every email that comes into its system. So it hits Google before it even comes to my workspace or the enclave. So it's already gone through Google's protection. So we're allowed to inherit that. And again, email scans are checked. And Google again opens attachments in sandboxes, so it can't affect the enclave itself. Google manages their own SIEM, which allows workspace folks. You don't have to manage or configure the SIEM. You just get to access it. So it was, again, another convenience. They handled all of the auditing controls because all we had to do was query it and investigate things. So a
So
lot of
you
what
signed
they
an NDA and you got the body of evidence and were able to see and demonstrate to DIBCAC that things were actually being done. Even
yeah.
though Google's an international company and they probably have intellectual property and special things, they allowed you to see that and provide that to help you pass. And they have a CRM. That's a lot of openness for an international corporation with special intellectual property.
Yes, it definitely was helpful. Between doing the STIGs, so Security Technical Implementation Guides from DoD, what was great about it was, again, to pat myself on the back, when we finally got to doing the STIGs, I had already done like 90% of them just based on experience and going through the controls and the settings. And in addition to getting their CRM, once we saw all the things we could inherit, we had already approved upon those. So yes, we could inherit this, but we made it even stronger with kind of that defense in depth approach. So we had a security measure in front and then their inheritance. So we actually made what they were doing stronger from our point of view. Again, defense in depth is the biggest strength SecureCMMC has. There's multiple layers of checks and balances and authorizations and things like that.
So, Michael, tell us, you mentioned from your experience. So far, if somebody's on this call and they've never heard of Secure CMMC and they've never heard of Michael Dempsey, it sounds like, hey, you got a pretty smart IT guy who built a system, but there's a lot more to the story. Tell us a little bit about your experience and where you've worked, the number of and types of assessments you've worked on and environments. Like you have an amazing background that gives you some gravitas to this build.
So yeah, the stakes, if you knew what the acronym was, you know that you've worked at DoD for a long time. I originally started in 2002 doing DITSCAP, DIACAP, so DoD ATO assessments under 853. I did that for 4, 5, 6 years. I then switched over to the federal side and was doing FISMA assessments, again, under 853, for about 14 or 15 years. Um, One of my clients was DOT. I pretty much assessed every single system at DOT except for FAA, to be clear. FAA is bigger than DOT. So I did everything at DOT, all of those agencies. So I have the experience with both hardening and assessing. I'm probably near, um, I tried to calculate, but it got up to like 600 or 700 assessments that I've conducted under 853, and probably another 300 or 400 I managed other teams to do. So I have all this experience in 853. So when 171 came out, it was kind of a relief. It was a lot less controls, but the advantage I had was that I understood where all of the controls came from, right? So 853 Rev 2, 853 Rev 3, Rev 4, and Rev 5. I know what the controls were looking for originally. Um, I know what controls were old school, right? Things that require you to have a firewall. Well, a lot of the today's systems don't have firewalls, all these enclaves and things. So I had a great knowledge based on all of those assessments that when I came into here. Obviously, before I did assessments, I was an admin. Like I said, that's how I built this. As I built it, I had my admin hat on and my assessor hat. So I was trying to satisfy admin security and the assessor part. I started out, for all you older folks with Novell. I think Toby, you were also a Novell guy.
Yeah.
So Novell NetWare was where I started. So I started with my 64 diskettes installing Novell and kind of grew from there and became the assessor. So a unique set of knowledge. I know it seems like, how does this young guy have so many years of experience? But it's the camera. So sorry.
It's the camera. Okay.
Is that
Well, well, let's talk a little about that. You mentioned some of these things, and there's some frustrations that your system addresses for C3POs, but also for OSCs and OSAs. Let's talk a little bit about enterprise and enclave and why you chose to make an enclave.
Sure. So the enterprise approach, obviously by definition, is all of your systems. So this would include every system you have, whether it's HR or accounting, it's all on the same network. So you'd have to apply this to everybody, versus the enclave where it stands alone. You have more control over the access. So now you only have 10 or 15 people. So the enclave is easier for access management, and the settings are specific to that. So it's not interchangeable. So if your enterprise is Microsoft with an enclave, you can still be Microsoft, but your enclave is separate from that. So there's no cross-contamination, there's no leakage. It's just a different configuration and infrastructure for it.
So a lot of people hear Google and think they can't use Microsoft products or Microsoft endpoints. Is that true?
That is not true. So Windows endpoints are totally fine. Again, as I mentioned earlier, most of the action is between the browser and workspace. So it's self-contained within Google, and the endpoint itself is okay to be Windows. Um, you can, as an OSC, you can always download the data and use Word. It increases the boundary, and you'll have to add more protections. Hence, it starts growing, right? So now you're out of the enclave. So you can use it. There are configurations and setups. It's unique for everybody. So you have to kind of, as the IT guy says, it depends.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the second frustration. We were talking a little bit about Microsoft, and you were running into that frustration. You heard it you got it yourself, right? But you were hearing it from others. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So Microsoft obviously being the big person on the block for operating systems and things, everything was geared towards that. Even the secondary things, so like external seams and backups, they all focused on Microsoft solutions. And the folks with Google, Google still has a pretty large portion of the market. Those companies were being left out. There was no solution for them, no place for them to go. And so when they came out as FedRAMP High, it just kind of just clicked, and it was like these folks need help. And not only that, because of what I just said, it's an enclave from Microsoft environments that helps, again, defense in depth. Microsoft, your corporate environments here, but hey, when I go to my enclave, I'm on this machine. So the Google folks now had a way to access things and an implementation strategy for what they already had.
Yeah, so the Google people were very happy, and there had at the time there was fear that Google didn't address items C through G in
Correct.
7012, but all of that got resolved,
Yeah.
and things have moved forward. Frustration number three, as you were thinking about enclaves and the Google approach, the disruption. Talk to us a little bit about this operations disruption.
Yeah, and I kind of touched on it in the last one. At that enterprise level, it applies to everybody. So you're securing everyone, or you're managing OUs, you're managing different groups. Um, and so it gets complicated. And then sometimes all of the users get locked down, right? So the easiest management is if everyone has the same settings and same configurations. So now you're requiring all of the users in your organization to be locked down, even though they're not touching that CUI. Whereas with the enclave, only those people log in and they only have to adjust to that extra security, right? Because everyone knows security is a pain. You had to get things done with security. So this helps eliminate the group of folks who have to touch the CUI are in here, and the other folks get to continue on the way they normally did. So less disruption to the enterprise when you use the enclave approach to this.
Yeah,
And
and
that was the big deal, right? We didn't want to affect OSCs or C3PO's approach. So again, initially this was a C3PO solution. Um, we've helped a lot of C3POs use this. I think I'm jumping ahead a few slides. But they wanted it because they didn't want their corporate environment. That was the key to the solution, was that it was a simplified environment to manage. The rest of their users weren't affected. Only the assessors had to use this. And again, for the OSCs, the same thing. The CUI users are the only ones who would be in here. So it helps with that operation disruption and completely, I want to say eliminates it, but there's pretty close to elimination.
yeah, shadow IT exists because people need to get work done and they get desperate, and this helps fight that desire and need. All right, well, let's jump in. We're gonna go a little bit in depth about Secure CMMC, how it's put together, what it does. Some of these things we've mentioned, we won't belabor them, but review this for us again briefly, the overview and this idea of PFE, prime furnished equipment.
Sure. So a lot of what's here is what we just said. So Google Workspace is a FedRAMP High. Therefore, it meets all of the NIST 171 controls. They've issued a Google CMMC implementation guide that will tell you what you can do. Um, they have attestations about level 2 for their environment. Um, Supports full line of business applications. So again, Google Workspace is a SaaS, and all of their products and services are available within that workspace for you, including Gemini. So as an OSC, you may want to use Gemini. Gemini is actually FedRAMP High. It's included in their services on that.
Yeah, so
I,
let's pause a second. Like that's an amazing thing to have and know that it's secure, FedRAMP high, and only not training on your data and everything. AI is the hot thing to mention. It's again one thing that people don't necessarily realize is a life changer in the Google environment. It's already there, ready to go and help you.
it remains in your environment within your
Yes.
workspace.
All
Uh,
right, talk about prime furnished equipment. We made up this term a little bit ago. We were looking at GFE, government furnished equipment. How does this Google environment that you engineered use prime furnished equipment? What does that do for somebody?
so the biggest problem Primes had was the subs, as we talked about. How are they going to be certified? Um, and the approach we took was that the subs could use their workspace. They could manage the users accessing their workspace so that the sub would not have the CUI in their system. So therefore, they only had to be level 1, not level 2. And so they could create user accounts and provide them with equipment that they own, the prime. So the prime, like the government, is providing equipment to their subs to do the work within their environment, hence prime furnished equipment versus the government furnished. So they can manage the devices, full control over them, full control over the user access and permissions within their environment. So give them a kind of a flow down control over their subs.
So the question some people ask is, doesn't that make the prime into a CSP? Aren't they providing IT services and reselling? And I guess the term that I'd offer up to people to consider is the concept of an augment user that goes through all the policies, procedures, and practices of the prime. Is there something we should add to that? Did I nail it?
No, that's pretty accurate. They're just users of their environment. They're not, it's not the subs environment. They're not buying licenses for themselves. They don't own it. They're just a user. So again, the construction industry was the big one with subs who have problems, right? Construction industry has, 10 cement companies across the country that they use 1 week at a time, every 6 months, and they're not going to get level two. So this was a way for them to say, here's a laptop, come in, you look at our data, it stays safe, you never touch it, and you're good to go. And so yes, they're just users of that environment.
All right, thank you for that clarification. So we talked about some of this. You talked about the speed that you passed, but that doesn't necessarily work for an OSC. There's some work to be done. What might be a more typical time for somebody who's going from zero to hero, right? They're starting from nothing. They want to buy an enclave and be able to pass a self-assessment or a third-party assessment.
Yeah, so the build itself, the basic build is pretty straightforward. Takes, a couple of weeks to do that. Um, Once you get all your domains and licensing and all your network um, elements in place, the build takes about a week or two. But keep in mind, SecureCMMC also comes with its own documentation package that outlines all of the build, all of the procedures. So again, from a C3PO point of view, we enable them to have the processes to use that enclave. So there may have been a setting that can't technically be done. So we documented what a process would be to satisfy that control and objective. So after we build the environment, the documentation has to be updated for that OSC and their processes to make sure they can do it. Um,
So we like to say that documentation both defines and reflects the environment. That takes
yes,
a bit, right? People need muscle memory. They have to know how the system works, right?
exactly. You're going to be on the assessment. So the assessor is going to ask you questions. So it's your documentation as an OSC. Although someone else is writing it and preparing it, you need to understand it. They're going to look to you to make sure you understand your processes and procedures.
Yeah, you have to own it yourself. So we didn't say a time out loud, but typically a wiser timeline might be 3 to 6 months. The more time you can spend, the more mastery you have of the system. Ultimately, you're defending data to defend a warfighter who's out there risking their lives so that we can talk about how to run our business. It's not something where you can just check the box, or it shouldn't be. And you want your teams to know that documentation and to know the policies, procedures, and practices. So you mentioned earlier that a lot of people are using this. Over 20% now of C3POs have launched their services using Secure CMMC. You must be pretty proud of that.
Yeah, I am. If you look at the list, some of them are pretty large CPA firms and consultant firms. And they saw the benefit of having that unique enclave separate, right? So, for instance, to use O'Connor Davies as an example, they're a 100-year-old CPA firm. They have hundreds and hundreds of customers in all different branches, and they didn't want to have to bring their environment into scope just to do CMMC assessments. So they purchased the enclave, and it was standalone, and it didn't interfere or affect any of their users except for their assessors. This is where they logged in. And so that's the general approach, whether a C3PO or an OSC, right? You want to keep that small and separate from the corporate environment. Much easier to manage.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit. We've covered a lot of things. We're going to review a few of them and talk a little bit again about what Secure CMMC does that's a bit different. So Go for it, Michael. Tell us the three things here that make it different, or three or four things.
Yep. So reduce scope, that applies to every company. You should always be trying to reduce your footprint, your CUI boundary and scope, which is what this enclave does. Reduce cost, again, Microsoft and GCC in comparison is much more expensive. Um, if you can even figure out what the actual pricing is for Microsoft and GCC and all the different elements you have to purchase to get that. Google is much more cost effective and straightforward pricing. And again, timeline, like Toby said, 3 to 6 months, we can have it up and running and have you have an understanding of the environment, not just, hey, Mike and Toby built it for us, bring the assessors in, we're good to go. That's not how it works. It's a system. So, maybe that's what we should have been saying, that, it's not just a technical enclave, it's a system approach to CMMC, right? The documents are your documents. We're not writing the documents to explain to assessors what you're doing.
Yeah.
So the SSP should be telling you what is in place, and that's how the system works. We're clearly stating what's in place, what's happening. It's not just an explanation of something.
Yeah, what we like to, or at least the business development team likes to say, it's a lifestyle, not an event. So, all right, well, let's talk a little bit about the boundary diagram here. This is up on the website too, but people ask, like, how can you do it so simply? Could you walk us through this diagram?
I felt that was very complex, with my sarcasm coming out there. Yeah, so again, Microsoft Workspace is a SaaS solution. So it's self-contained. And it's a browser. So in the bottom left corner is the browser connection. So whether you're on a Windows machine, a Mac machine, whatever it may be, those
Okay, I
devices
got
are
to
out
pick
of
on you. You
scope.
misspoke and said Microsoft Workspace. This is Google Workspace.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I
That's
was
okay.
looking at the word Microsoft when I read that. Sorry.
Yeah, but go ahead.
So the endpoints are out of scope because nothing leaves the browser. The communication goes from the browser to Workspace, and that is the only connection there is. And it's a TLS connection. It's either 1.2 or greater. The configuration prevents it from going below 1.2. From that same Chrome browser, the administrators can access the admin console, which is all security features, all administration, one location, everything is in one place. The regular users, the blue lines, they have no access to the admin console. They just don't have the correct role. It doesn't allow them. It just says, go find a new account when you try to do that. The user, again, takes the TLS connection into Workspace where all the data resides. It doesn't leave the shared drives. It stays within the mail system within Workspace. On the right-hand side, the email on the outside, this is just to demonstrate whitelisting. So the environment blocks as much as it can. So for C3POs, they have no internet access at all. All email is blocked except for whitelisted organizations and domains. So again, it's a system. That's part of the system. OSCs obviously may need a lot more open, but that's all tracked and done through the whitelisting process. Uh, I wish there was
All
more
right.
to say, but that's the simplicity of the environment.
Yeah, it does. It just saves time and money. So let's talk a little bit about prime furnished equipment. And before you jump in, give a concrete example, literally, pun intended. Michael mentioned concrete suppliers. We have some contractors who issue a very inexpensive Chromebook to a single person company. A guy owns his own truck. He goes to the plant, picks up cement, goes to a location, and just and delivers that product. Somebody who would have to leave the government contracting world. They'd never be able to afford to be compliant. But now they have a Chromebook, and they can open that up, log in, see what they need to do, and uh, and then when they're done, they just close the lid. Michael, what happens when they close the lid on the Chromebook?
Machine's wiped. So
Yeah,
every
there's
time you open
nothing
it,
there.
it's a fresh Chrome OS every time you open the Chromebook.
Yeah, so re-provisioning every time somebody logs in just takes a minute or two. Amazing security. And if the guy drops it out of the car or the truck and drives over it, um, you know, $500 is not nothing, but it's not $1,500 or $2,500 for a Windows machine. Other items here on this slide that you think we should talk about?
with your example of the Chromebook, if you use a Chromebook, it's 100% managed by the Google Workspace environment. We can remote wipe it. We control the access. We control what apps they can see and not see. We can control Marketplace and Google Play and every feature. Then Google Admin, I can even see all the hardware information. I can know what IP they're on, how much storage, how fast is the fan spinning, what's the temperature of it. So you have 100% control because again, it's a Google product, right? So Google Browser, Google Workspace gives you 100% control over everything about that machine. I like the
So in
instant.
the Windows boxes, we still have the control for applications, but maybe not the fan speed and things like that.
Right, exactly. There's varying levels. That's the great part about Workspace is we have for the Windows machines, we can control a lot of it. We can even take over the login and make it a Google login to the machine. There's lots of features. Um, there's hundreds of things we can control directly on a Windows machine. But with the OMI language, we can control hundreds more on the Windows machines. So we have a good amount of control over Windows machines if that's the route people want to go. For folks
So
to,
for our contractors who have like 20 or 30 sites and each site has 15 to 25 subs and they want to pursue an opportunity, they could deploy this environment and use prime furnished equipment and have all those subs go through the proper policies, procedures, and practices to be an augment user and have their entire the normal team they use, all of the subs ready to go as soon as their environment's ready to go. That's really an incredible increase in the speed to allowing your team to operate. It's pretty amazing what you've built.
right. And the key to what you just said is that they have to follow the same procedures, practices, and policies. So they still have to do security training, right? They still have to be authorized and things like that. So they're just taking right into that your organization's processes and procedures. They won't have to develop it; they just have to follow it.
And we, of course, have been using construction because that's how the built for Secure CMMC product was originally made. All of the things we're talking about could apply to a software developer, uh, architects, engineers, manufacturers. Anybody who has subs could take advantage of this functionality and really take a lot of compliance costs out of their entire supply chain.
Release, reducing that cost for their RFP responses.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on here. Owning versus leasing your enclave. You know, a lot of systems out there, when you sign up to an enclave or even an enterprise system, the way the contract's worded and the way it's delivered, people end up being tied to that company because they don't truly own, they're just renting. When people buy a Google solution from Secure CMMC, the tenant's in their name. They own it. The people that support it, you or I, serve at their pleasure, and they control everything. That's a tremendous reduction in risk because you're not relying on the other company. You're relying on Google. But if we mismanage our business and go away, everybody's environment keeps running. I think that's a pretty cool thing to have everybody be able to own their stuff. Um,
It was intentional. So again, put it back then I put on my administrator hat and I was always annoyed at the vendors as a system administrator um, that the company would buy something proprietary, so to speak, and we had to call them every time. They wouldn't even teach me to use it, type of thing. So I said, this is something that the OSC and the C3PO should own and not have to use me directly. Um,
So they use you or me or any of the vendors that support or sell Secure CMMC because they like them, not because they have to.
Correct. Correct.
Well, that's awesome. I really appreciate you doing that because I use your system too. All right. So setting up a secure CMMC enclave, what does that look like? We'll just give somebody a little bit of a life, a day in the life, as it were, and the first steps if you were to purchase secure CMMC. Can you talk us through, you mentioned it takes a couple weeks for some technical settings. Talk us through the process a little bit.
Yeah. So one of the things we do is we want you to use a separate domain name. again, to separate corporate from the enclave itself. We allow you to purchase it. You own the domain name. It's not under us. You acquire that. And then based on that, we start doing the configurations for DNS and email and those types of things. So it takes a little bit of time to get that together. While we're doing that, we are acquiring information for users. What do you want? How is that going to be structured? Things like that. So that once we start configuring the environment, we have that information and it's your environment, right? So you tell us who the users are there groups, so we go through a whole process to understand what you need for your organization and then how we should build it. And in this case, M&S performs all of those functions for you, with you, I should say, right? Not for you, but with you, because they need to know who everyone is, who's authorized, who's not, because that's part of your level 2 assessment, right? You have to authorize your users, and M&S creates it, right? So that's part of your security system security plan, is that they do that. So again, even from once we start building it, we're already level 2 conscious, right? That you're authorizing these lists of users, you're authorizing these devices and these settings. And then as we go along.
Yeah, and we layer on our compliance as a service, our CAS program that for a fraction of the cost of a single CCA gives you an entire team of CCAs that are available for you all the time to answer questions, help with change control, give you advice, and help you integrate things into your business. Earlier we talked about some of the transformational things. Obviously, we've specialized in C3POs, and OSCs are a newer thing. We talked about this idea of lowering stress or risk, and the fear around this. This secure CMMC system really does an amazing job of transforming this process to something that's pretty low stress. The risk is really well understood, and you're continuing to add things to this, right? I heard you're developing new options all the time. Maybe once every 6 months you do a major release. When's your next release, Michael?
Yeah, shortly. A lot of it comes from Google features being added. Um, and like for instance, last year there was no Gemini. This year, Gemini is a part of the entire environment. You can configure it for any system applications, limit it to users, limit it to applications. So that was a big feature we put in. Additionally, maintaining the documentation to match all of these updates and changes. That's part of the major change process. But sometimes it's just, surprise, let's see what's a good thing we can give to you guys. Always know.
All right. Well, as we're coming up to our question and answer time soon, we just have these key takeaways for you to consider. There is a gap. There's a lot of work to be done in the next 30 months. The enterprise is a heavier lift and sometimes causes friction for normal people doing everyday jobs who do not need this level of security. And so this speed to compliance with an enclave solution, especially with Google and its simplified rollout, really helps close the gap and allows you to be compliant now. And Michael, I want you to talk a little bit about this idea. We haven't mentioned it to now, but we've heard this phrase enterprise or enclave to enterprise conversion. When might that be something to consider?
Growth, I would say, right? So as you grow, you may find that the enclave is applicable to the entire company, right? Hey, we're really focusing on this. 90% of everyone we have uses it. Let's turn the enterprise into this. And there's not much to it. I mean, you migrate some data over and just start expanding the OUs and the groups and management of it. So it is something that can become your enterprise solution without
Yeah, there,
much change.
there's some beauty. You have a tested system. People are already working in it. You have some quarterbacks or leaders in your company. So if the business and the risk decisions lead to saying everybody needs to be in, you can move people in to a tested, understood system. Well, we're up to the question and answer portion here. One of the questions we've talked about already, but I just want to reiterate that a normal sort of sane timeline would be more like 3 to 6 months. If somebody wants to do this in a shorter time, is that possible? What kind of lift do they need? And any comments on like how difficult or not it is to do it in a shorter time period?
It's definitely a much heavier lift. It could be done, but it's going to take a lot of extra effort on both sides, both on the implementation and the OSC side and learning and understanding it. So it is possible, not recommended, but it is possible. I believe the fastest we've ever done it was 3 weeks. But
Yeah.
they didn't, but the company didn't actually learn all the documents. They were
Yeah,
close, but they didn't quite make it. But they passed the DIPCAC assessment, I will say.
yeah, and that's the key thing. Like we want people, and people should want to really know their system. We don't want to pass with a conditional, or have DipCAT come back a second time. We want people to know it, have muscle memory, really be secure, understand not only what they're doing and how to do it, but a little bit of why they're doing it. And those things together allow them to have true security and protect our country. How much does it cost? This is an interesting question. Everybody always wants to know how much it costs, but there's some nuance here. What are some of the things that affect cost, Michael?
Number of users will affect your cost because you're gonna have licenses for each and equipment for each.
So we have your Google licenses and the user count. What
Yeah.
else?
What makes it grow?
Right? The boundary, if you extend the boundary, you add other machines, right?
Yeah,
Ma-
well, that's what we were just saying, number of
Yeah.
users, right? So the equipment and licensing is really what increases the cost to it.
Yeah.
The enclave is the enclave. It can be any size, 10 people or 10,000 people.
Yeah, so people can basically multiply the Google expenses after the setup
yeah,
and just the normal monthly support per user, and they're able to run a business plan out for the next 18 months or 24 months and really understand their costs. No
exactly.
surprises. Typically, a monthly fee at a base would start between $1,500 and $2,500 a month, for the user fees to support it. And depending on how many years you want to contract for, there may be a setup fee or not to get things up. If you need faster things, there's extra fees. If you're going to crash a project and you're going to put 10 people in learning the system and we have to put 5 people in, all sorts of things can affect the cost. And so it really ends up being something that's tuned to each user. But I would say the monthly fee is the one given. That'll always be sort of in that range to kick off. And then the setup fees, again, if you're doing a 2 or 3 year contract, you may not even have a setup fee depending on the number of users. All right, we've kind of come to the end here. Um, I don't uh, I don't see a question window here, so I'll have to rely on James to tell me if there's any questions coming in. I don't think we have any currently. So I think we would just like to thank you for your time and attention today. We're excited to be useful. If we can, please reach out to either of us. And if we're not the right people or the right product, we probably know somebody who is, and we're always happy to defend the warfighter and make sure you have the right stuff.
Exactly. Thank you, Toby, for having me. And
Sure thing. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.